Hey guys, it's Caroline, and today I'm going to talk about a bunch of really hyped up books that I personally didn't love and what I think you should read instead. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First book I have is Caraval. I've read this entire trilogy. I don't like it. I don't know why I've read the whole thing. The magic system is just so loosey-goosey. They just make stuff up as they go. It doesn't make any sense. You feel like anytime a problem arises, someone has discovered the magic to automatically fix it. The men are really annoying in this. They're super toxic. They're either being sexy or they're telling the main character why they can't love them. They're killing people, but like not in a fun way, but in a truly just they're evil people. It's hard to get invested in the love triangle because they're just so bad. And the writing is just so over the top in a way that's just simply bad writing. And a lot of people love it for its whimsical prose and its good atmosphere, but the writing is often stuff like, he smelled like ashen sky and smoky roses. And you're like, those aren't, like, that's not a smell, okay? So what does that mean? Like, I get it, you're trying to say he's sexy, but it doesn't work. So if you're looking for an atmospheric read that has a little bit of a loose magic system but isn't high fantasy, instead you should just check out books by Erin Morgenstern. So first book is The Night Circus. This has the sort of game circus atmosphere that Caraval does, but it's not annoying. The prose is much better. It is slower and less action-packed. However, it's just like simply a better written book with characters you can actually care about versus characters that you just hate and they're annoying to watch run around. This is actually entertaining, although it is much more of a slow burn. The other option is you can always check out the Starlight C, which is Erin Morgenstern's more recent book. It kind of deals with video games and the idea of unlocking all these different levels. And there's like magical library. It is also a soft magic system in the sense that it's not this high fantasy world, but it is super atmospheric despite the lack of a true game. It is based on video games and sort of the kind of quest finding scenario, so it still has that same vibe that Caraval has despite not being technically like a carnival or a circus like the Night Circus is. Next up, I have Cassandra Clare's The Mortal Instruments. Now, I've read all of the main Shadowhunter books, which is like 13 of them again. Don't know why I'm here considering the first 6, basically the 3 Mortal Instruments series and then the next 3 series, I can't even remember his name, and it's terrible. These are so awful. Jace, the main character, is so annoying. Everyone loves him, and I hate him. I find him annoying. Jace and Clary are constantly trying to decide if they're brother and sister or not. Sometimes they think they are, sometimes they think they're not. It flips back and forth several times. They have a weird romance. I don't like it. Sometimes they think they're brother and sister, but they'll still kiss, and I find that super uncomfortable. Sometimes they don't think they're brother and sister, but then like can't get their romance together because they're so stuck up on how they used to think they were brother and sister. It's very odd. It's very boring to read about because it keeps going back and forth and they can't decide. They love each other, but it's too hard, and it's just so annoying. And Jace isn't even that fun to read about. He's like the typical bad boy, but everyone thinks it's so hot, and really he's just annoying. Like, drop him. Anyway, instead of reading this, you should just go ahead and jump right into her later books. I'm telling you, you don't need to read the original 6 to read the other ones. I'm particularly talking about Chain of Gold because it actually is quite fantastic. It just like tugs on your heartstrings. It's sweet. It's set in, I think, the 1800s in London. It's very interesting. I also think The Dark Artifices, is that what this one's called? I don't know. Basically, all the other trilogies that aren't The Mortal Instruments are really good. The ones that aren't set in present day are particularly good, and her newest one is the best. The nice thing about them is all the trilogies, you can just start reading the beginning of the trilogy and you're fine. And just skip the original. Like Jace, Clary, who are they? I don't care. I don't want them. Next up, on a more literary side, we have Theyre There, which everyone was raving about. I think it was last year, or maybe it was 2018. I don't know, but everyone was raving about this book, saying it was the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm not saying it's not a good book. I'm just saying I do not think it's as good as all the hype. I do appreciate that it talks about the Native American experience, particularly Native Americans living in urban settings, which is so often a topic and a character and a setting that we just don't pull together. And I think it's really important that it's out there and we read about these stories. That doesn't necessarily mean this book is a good book. I think my issue with it is it's this whole chorus of voices that are tangled together and they end up meeting at a powwow at the end of the book. My issue was that too many of the characters, it felt like he had come up with the characters and then was forced at the end to find weird and interesting or new ways to connect them all together, but ended up using some of the same reasons, like missing family tropes, to pull these people back together and make them connected at the powwow. And so it felt like a bunch of the same stuff was just reiterated, like this character was finding their dad, this character was finding their mom, this character was finding their sibling, and it felt pretty repetitive. And it felt a little bit forced too. There's also gun violence in this book, and while obviously like gun violence is bad, I don't like reading about it. I particularly don't like reading about it when it's to no end. I didn't feel like it really did anything for the story or was really set to make a big point. It was just there for like an emotional ending, and I found it a little bit cheap, and I found it annoying to like read about, and I thought it was just to like get me to feel emotional rather than like actually making a real statement. So instead, you should read Girl, Woman, Other. I love this book. It is similar in that it has a whole cast of characters. It's almost like a chorus. You go from one to the other. They're all connected in that they're all black women, or identify as black women, or did identify as black women, although no longer identify as black women. And they all kind of know each other and they're woven together. This one feels like the opposite approach from Theyre There, in that these characters, the author basically just looked at a set of people and sort of figured out all the connections you could make and then built characters off of that. So you'll talk to a mother, and she'll be a black single mother in the art world, and all of a sudden then the next chapter will be her daughter, and it'll sort of give you the insight of what that relationship is. So before, when you were thinking that daughter was really difficult and not acting right, now all of a sudden you see the daughter's side of things and how she feels about the way her mother treats her, but you understand now because you understand the mother's experience and you know why the mother treats her that way. So it's very, very interesting. So it's built off of the relationships rather than all these set characters that then have to be forced to come together at the end. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it deserves the Booker 100%. I can't think about this book without getting angry because it had to share the Booker with the Testaments, which is a garbage book. Which brings me to my next book that I don't like, which is The Handmaid's Tale. Now, I do not like The Handmaid's Tale. I've read it twice. Both times, did not like it. I think it's overhyped. It's overhyped. The show is good. It's an interesting concept. I don't mind it. I don't like Margaret Atwood's writing. I think she's not particularly good at writing. That's a hot take, but I don't think she is. And it's kind of boring. It's so popular because it was such an innovative concept when she came out with it, and she was kind of one of the first to write such a like feminist dystopian or a gender-based dystopia. However, I don't think her world building is particularly good. As someone who grew up reading a lot of dystopians because that was the hot new thing when I was a teenager, this just doesn't cut it. And the thing that bothers me the most about this book is that it borrows so much from slavery. They call it the Female Underground Railroad, where they take the women from Gilead and they move them back to Canada. They call it the Female Underground Railroad, obviously borrowing from the Underground Railroad. Uses a lot of different things that happened during slavery, but this book is completely colorblind, doesn't talk about race hardly at all, basically ignores it, and which makes no sense. Like, you're telling me if there was a theocracy that was just like this whack, that there wouldn't be repercussions for people of color? Like, you're wrong. It's just because Margaret Atwood's a white woman, she didn't think about it, it wasn't important to her, it was the 1980s, she didn't care. And I just think that if you're gonna like steal from the trauma of black people, then you should probably like mention them. I don't know. It just seems wrong to me. And then, like I said, then she wrote the Testaments, which is also just absolute garbage. It's like not even in the same realm as The Handmaid's Tale, and I also hate The Handmaid's Tale. But anyway, instead of reading The Handmaid's Tale, you should read the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. N.K. Jemisin is an absolute queen. Her books are so good. The 5th season is wonderful. It is a dystopian. It's basically set in a world where there are these ecological disasters, and when they happen, it's called a 5th season. Cities basically shut down. They kick out anyone who's not absolutely necessary, anyone who is like an artisan or doesn't like directly help with their survival gets put to the curb, and there's like no chance of their survival. There are also certain people who have special abilities, mostly that they can handle, like they can deal with the tectonic plates, shake them up, and it's really neat, but those people are enslaved because it's very scary, but also there's this idea that they can maybe control and help the seasons. It's about like identity, sexuality, you know, enslavement, you know, what ecological disasters. I mean, it is great. It is thought-provoking. It is well written. If you're looking for a dystopian that actually like cares about real life topics and dives into them and makes you think about more than one, aka just gender, like the Handmaid's Tale does, I would definitely recommend trying out the 5th season. And there's 3 books and they're all good. They've all won the Hugo, whereas the Handmaid's Tale is hot garbage. So that being said, next up I have 3 Dark Crowns. Now this one, a lot of people really love it. It's 4 books, way too many books. It's way more books than it needs to be. It's essentially 3 sisters. They have to fight to the death to figure out which one's the queen. It's been happening for years. They live on an island. And for book after book after book, they decide not to kill each other, which I don't know why no other triplet series in this like long lineage of triplets has never seen, hey, we're sisters, let's not kill each other, until this book, but apparently so. They were just killing each other, and now all of a sudden these girls are like wonderful and decided not to kill each other. Anyway, they decide not to kill each other for 4 books or whatever, and it's boring, and I don't care, and they just keep running into each other and not killing each other. That's it. That's really the whole series. What you should read instead is Sea Witch. Now this is a dark retelling of, or not a retelling, but it's a dark origin story about Ursula from The Little Mermaid. So it's like, why is there this sea witch living under the sea? It's got the same like island sort of seacoast vibes. It's dark. It's just not, and it's I mean, I think it's a series, but I only read the first book. Just read this one instead. It's more fun. That's all I've got to say. It's not that this is a 5-star read either. It's just that 3 Dark Crowns is so boring. And at least this gives you context, and you come with it with the knowledge that it's tied to The Little Mermaid. And it's just fun. Whereas 3 Dark Crowns makes me want to pound my head into a wall. Next up, Bridget Jones's Diary. Now I read this recently for a readathon. I have no idea why I haven't unhauled it yet. It was so terrible. I think I gave it 1 star. I may have given it 2. I read it for the readathon because it's super quick. I heard it was funny. It had something to do with, you know, read a book then watch the movie. And oh my god, I laughed, but I also hated every second of it. It's so problematic. She writes her weight at the beginning of every single entry, which like, that doesn't tell you that this has got some issues. Nothing will. But she's really obsessed with her weight. She's like, I don't know, she's like 119 pounds or something, and she's freaking out about how fat she is. It's like, girl, you're good. You are good. And she's really obsessed with how much she's eating. It's really not great for anyone, like super trigger warnings for eating disorders, but just also anyone who inhabits a body and eats. I wouldn't read this. If you eat, ever, I would not read this. It's so stress-inducing because you're like, oh my god, I'm terrible. I fed myself today. Does that mean I deserve to live or not? It's terrible. And the funniness doesn't make up for how terrible it is. And it's just so painful to read someone who hates themselves so much. It's just painful to see that. And you're supposed to kind of find it funny that she is so self-hating. And I don't. Instead, you should read Queenie, which is kind of even billed on their, you know, the little, I don't know, bio. It like, not the bio, in the little description, they like to say that it is Americana mixed with Bridget Jones's Diary, which is really funny because I love Americana and I hate Bridget Jones's Diary. So it's very interesting that this book brought the 2 together, and I ended up liking it. Basically, Queenie has just kind of gone through a breakup, but it's sort of a we're on a break situation, and she's not really sure where to go. She's feeling a little lost. She's kind of in a dead-end job, she feels like. She's got about 3 friends that she can trust, and basically her life is going down the toilet, and she's trying to piece it all back together. She's hooking up with a lot of guys. You know, she's trying to decide whether or not to go to therapy. She's like, I don't know, basically she's a mess. But it deals with a lot of more interesting topics than just like, writing down how much she ate. I mean, it talks about mental health, it talks about race, it talks about sexuality, it talks about a lot of really important issues, and not just those important issues, but in relation to being a part of an immigrant community and some of the struggles that you face, just like cultural expectations when it comes to mental health and seeking mental health help. I think it's really important, but it was also funny and cute and enjoyable. It didn't make me hate myself. It made me laugh, but also think, and I think all of those things are really super important. And then, lastly, I have Call Me By Your Name, which I feel like that's a pretty beloved book. I dislike it so deeply. I find the idea that someone who is older would come into, like, let's say my house and then try to start a relationship with my underage child is so chilling. To me, that seems so predatory, so wrong. And it's not helped by the fact that I feel like the main character feels bad so constantly because of how the older guy treats him. I don't even remember their names because I like blacked it out from my mind because I hated it so much. I know one of them's named Elio, but I don't know who's who. But I feel like he makes the younger kid feel so much like self-hatred, self-loathing. He like is confused and like kind of plays mind games with him, and I think it's gross, and I think it's inappropriate that he's just like showed up in their house, and I just feel like as if I was the parent, I would be so mad at this guy who showed up. And also, it's not helpful that Andre Aciman cannot write. I never thought he could write. I think he's a bad writer. And then in college, I had a lot of professors that would talk about how bad of a writer he is, and he's kind of a dick in real life. And he said some questionable things about like, which makes me feel even stronger about my issues with it, but he said some questionable things about how like all men kind of see young girls and like think it's sexy. And when I'm talking young girls, I think we're talking around the age of like 12 or 13, which really makes me think that the whole age gap issue, it makes it seem even worse in my eyes, knowing that he as a grown man thinks it's like cool for his guy friends to be like, that 12-year-old's hot. I think that's gross. But instead, you should read Heartstopper. Now, I recently picked up this graphic novel. I'm not a huge graphic novel person. I get weirded out on how fast I can read them. I don't know. Very odd. It's me. However, I think this is so cute. It's about two guys. One is openly gay and the other is not. They become friends, and it is just the cutest romance ever. It is so heartwarming. Like, you will read this and it will put a huge smile on your face. Like, there is no way to read this without just feeling gooey and mushy and like bubbly on the inside. It is so wonderful. Just so cute. The art style is so cute too. It matches the vibe of the book so much. The color palette is this like blue kind of thing. I love it. It's so cute. It's adorable. It'll make your heart melt and it doesn't hurt that I know that Andre Aciman would absolutely hate the idea that his work was being compared to a graphic novel, because he's a literary snob and would not believe that a graphic novel was real literature, which it is. And it would really piss him off that I'm telling you to read a graphic novel instead of his book, and he'll never see this, but I hope that it makes him turn over in his sleep just one time. Just one time. All right, those are all the books that I think are too hyped and what I think you should read instead. Leave anything in the comments down below if you have any thoughts about a hyped book that you think isn't as good as everyone says, and what I should read instead of that hyped book. Bye!